I have 5:30. Can we start? If we have everybody here? Okay.
Yes, we are ready to go.
Okay, then I think, Chris, were you going to start off and lead us? And
you bet. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public that are joining us tonight. Our study session item is a follow-up from a conversation that we had on January 5th regarding next steps for Quincy Farm. And the January 5th meeting was really a follow-up of multiple previous city council meetings. Just as a bit of context, the city had received interest from a couple of different parties for possible operations and management of Quincy Farm. And after initially considering some different ways to get public input at the January 5th meeting, City Council directed staff to produce a draft request for proposals to bring to City Council tonight for discussion. And that's what we are here to do. I know it's obviously a multiple page document, and I know council had an opportunity to review that. As Jay and I are going to take turns walking through some very high level overviews of what the different sections are. We aren't necessarily going to get into the details and nuts and bolts of individual sections or individual requirements. However, we fully expect that to be a part of the conversation. We're just assuming that council had a chance to review some of those. Please be aware, staff absolutely wants to hear all of council's input. If you have edits, grammar, punctuation, all those kinds of things, we absolutely want to hear it. However, just to make sure that we're making best use of our group time here, I would ask, maybe just shoot us an email with those red lines and we will absolutely incorporate those. We're hoping that tonight, based on council's motion prior, tonight we can focus on the higher level big picture. Is this the right kind of a document? Is this the right approach? Are we evaluating the right kinds of things? So, we're not going to get into hardcore details tonight at a staff level, but we certainly expect that to be a part of the conversation once we turn it over to council for discussion. Does that sound like acceptable approach to council? Lots of thumbs up and head nods. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. And all right, can everyone see that? All right. Let me just come down here. Well, no, I don't like that. All right, so how do I get out of that? There we go. I'm just going to use it from this screen, so I apologize for not having the ability to do a full screen. So again, this is the draft RFP. Council's discussion last time really revolved around the idea of a couple of exciting and intriguing proposals had come to light. What else might be out there, we won't know until we ask, was the general idea behind it. And so when we got some discussion from City Council, this RFP was less a contract for services, less a very strict legal reading of what you might be used to with some RFPs. And this was more a little softer approach, something that might resemble architectural competition, or something where we're attempting to not to put too many rules or restrictions on it. Let's see what folks give us. Let's see what kind of creativity various groups might have, and see what we get, as opposed to a more strict regulated contract for services kind of RFP. So again, like I said, Jay and I are going to take turns. There's really 6 different sections in the document. Obviously, there's an introduction, outlines the process, and explains what the city is hoping to see in the RFP, including programming to be offered and public access to the property. And that really just sort of hopefully sets the table for the remainder of the RFP. We transition then into section 1, and we really are trying to give potential respondents a a good overall view of first the city, but then also Quincy Farm, and the history of the farm, a description of the conservation easement, and some of the work that had been done prior to the RFP itself. And so again, just trying to set the table for potential responders to help them understand the context of which they may propose something. I'm actually, for the next 3 slides, I'm going to turn it over to Jay to let him walk through some of these specific RFP details.
So section 2, we extracted some goals from the visioning committee's mission statement. They didn't have any actual goals in their document. So we'd really like to have council look at these goals that we extracted from that statement and make sure this is the goals that city council agrees with. And if there are any other goals or changes to these goals, we tried to do the best we could to extract what we thought the mission and vision statement from the visioning committee looked like. I can go through all 3 of these goals, or we can go to the next section. So section 3 is the meat of the proposal of what we are actually looking for in the RFP. We want to make sure that whoever is proposing gives us a clear, succinct demonstration of the experience and should clearly and effectively communicate their vision and how the farm can benefit the community. We're asking for some of their qualifications, relevant experience, similar projects, or other projects where they were creative and had some great thinking in. We want to know their approach, how they envision managing the farm, what the ownership would look like for their approach. Would the city own it? Would the responder be the owner? How community access program and engagement would go. And then one thing we thought was important, and we thought council thought it was important, as the timeline of activation. How fast will the respondent be trying to get some activation going on the property? And then some financial feasibility and cost estimates. Explain how their proposal is economically feasible, including funding and possible partnerships that may be utilized to put on their activities. Okay. And then we wanted to make sure we had
Katie,
some
you're
evaluation.
muted.
Sorry, I was trying to wait because my son has his piano lesson, but hopefully that's not too disruptive in the background. I just wanted to quickly go back to goal 3 before you move on too far. My only comment about that was that I feel like it might be a little overly specific. I like the general idea of it, but listing so many examples might give the impression to someone that had a slightly different vision that they aren't meeting that goal, or some sort of perception that they're not meeting that goal. So I don't know that it's necessary to, maybe it just needs to say, provide opportunities for active organized programs, period. And maybe you could say, some ideas that have been considered in the past are
There you go.
this.
There you go.
Okay.
People
Yeah.
they're not proposing school field trips that they wouldn't be considered.
You get 3
Okay.
points for every school field trip. You get 2 points for a community garden,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, you don't want that. I would agree.
Generally, as a rule of how we're going to operate this meeting, are you looking for feedback as we're going right now? Because I'm kind of biting my tongue, waiting till the end, and then I was going to assume the mayor was going to call on us for comment.
I was too. I was going to wait until Jay got through the whole thing, and then we can go back.
Okay.
If that's okay. I had the same thought. Dan, thanks. Jay, why don't you go ahead and just run us through because I want you to get through the whole thing so we understand it, and then we can go back.
So we thought that was important that we had some evaluation criteria, but we didn't want to have criteria that was, a hard and fast numbering system or something like that. So We put the evaluation criteria together. Was the proposal complete? Were the goals matched from the outline? And how quickly will public access be provided? And then section 4.1, staff put together a suggested process and makeup of the evaluation committee. And then we thought the selection committee would then make a recommendation to the full city council for their consideration after whatever number of responders we choose to interview. The committee would then bring their number one to council if somebody rose to the top. And then section 4.2 right now is just a draft outline. There's no dates on that. There are some time periods of what we thought were some appropriate amounts of time for each portions of the process.
And so since this is the last slide, I'm just going to finish this up real quick. Obviously, then we have section 5.0. We might have had a little bit of help from City Attorney Guckenberger on this section. I don't know, maybe just a couple of phrases here or there. I'm kidding, obviously. And then we have the existing documentation, which is really just a link for more background so that somebody who wanted to get a complete picture of what's going on really could. So again, it looks like, if you just look at the slideshow, it looks pretty quick, but there's obviously a lot of content in there. So we would love to hear it. I will give council a heads up. I know that folks are chomping at the bit to ask questions, get clarification, maybe provide some suggestions or ideas. Just know that there's about 4 questions that staff, if they don't get discussed by council, we'll probably circle back and ask you specifically, areas that we really wrestled with and thought deserved council input. All of it deserves council input, but we thought these really did. The process for evaluating proposals. We would love to hear from staff on that, or council on that. The selection committee composition. There's a lot of different models. From my understanding, that even Cherry Hills Village has used in the past. So thoughts that council has on that. How many weeks should the RFP be open? So there's a few different timeline questions that council could obviously weigh in on, but I think that's one of the more critical ones. What are we missing? Is there some other requests, ideas, concepts that we want them to hit on that we're missing somehow? So those are the 4 that I have. So with that, that's our broad overview. And Mr. Mayor,
Great. That's a great segue. So let's go down the line if you can. And Councilor Blum, I want to call on everybody, make sure everybody has time. So Councilor Blum, would you like to start? You're on mute, Al.
Al, you're still on mute.
You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going back to, first of all, before we get into the details, the question is, who does this go to? How does the RFP go out to? And who are we trying to solicit to get the RFP? So the question is, where does this go? How do we publicize it? And who is going to get to see this? So
Nobody's gotten it yet, Al. This is obviously in draft, but it's going to be bid, I think, through the Rocky Mountain e-purchasing system is where it'll go out. That'll be the vehicle in which it'll go out. And I believe most of these type of users, I believe, research that and have their eyes on that system all the time for new alerts of opportunities. Is that right,
staff?
Staff?
Is it nonprofits? Is that what we're talking about? Or is this anybody?
perhaps. But I don't think that I would suggest to council that we also reach out to groups that we think might be interested directly, almost like I don't want to call it a recruitment, but more like just a different alternative way to get the word out is how I would phrase it. So if council knows of groups, shoot them our way so that we can ensure they get it.
All right.
Hey, Chris, do you have a list has been developed, a target list?
Jay, I don't think we have a target list right now.
No.
I know there's been a few different names thrown around. A lot of them are ones that I think that council's heard of before that might be interested or might be interested in being a partner, maybe not a lead. So, we've kicked around some of those, but I could not produce and put up on the screen for you 6 different potential groups. No.
Obviously, the Conservation Fund is one, since they're mentioned. There's some others you think of that out of the box. Kent Denver. I mean, we might want to send it to Kent Denver and see if they'd be interested.
Let me ask you this. Have we anticipated that, as let's say there are 3-4 groups we know, we might get 4 or 5 other groups that we don't know them to submit a proposal. And we may be looking at these, and there might be a couple of these groups that actually, if they come together, it would make it ideal. I'm trying to, this process is going to be completely open, right? I mean, are we going to have people come, and once we have all the proposal, people are going to go ahead and present these to us and everybody else going to listen? Because again, during this process, I foresee, group A and group B might say, you know what, we can actually form a partnership together and really just, put a new proposal together, or that is not allowed. You see
That's absolutely possible under this proposal.
But
These are
then-
simply proposals
so
to
maybe a
us.
second proposal then, Russell?
These are only proposals to us, so we can negotiate with anybody who's making a proposal. This is simply starting the conversation.
I will tell you, Mr. Mayor, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we were trying to walk a fine line with asking folks to give us a good enough picture to have a feel for what their ideas and their vision is. But we were sensitive to, having folks spend a ton of money on a first step when we still don't really, we're actually asking to see what they think some of the parameters are. So I think we were really envisioning trying to get a first run and maybe do some narrowing through a selection committee, not as opposed to maybe, presenting in front of, a council at a council night. And then maybe a second phase could be something else along those lines. We didn't include what that second phase was simply because we didn't know how many we're going to get, what the next, is it one? We just didn't have enough information. I think we've provided some language that gives us that kind of flexibility after this initial selection committee.
I did want to keep on with Councilor Blum and not lose you, because you have the chair, Councilor Blum.
I've got one more question specific, and then I think we can move on. And the question really relates to some feedback we are getting now based on some letters and other contacts. By putting in section 3.0 proposals approach, we're talking about ownership of the property. And by looking at this, does it sound like, and this is my concern, that we are offering to sell or otherwise part with the property? And is that something we should have in there, or should we be looking for people that would take over and run and fund and do what was originally set forth in the conservation easement? So that's my question. By the way that's worded, it looks like we're offering to somewhat divest ourselves of title, and that's a concern.
From a staff perspective, I don't think that we were not trying to pick a winner in any way. Ownership, not ownership, what title, not title. We were just trying to keep options open. And so, we don't know what the right solution is. We don't necessarily have a set outcome that we want to get rid of it or we absolutely want to keep it. We just want to see what folks brought to the table. However, that's what staff came to the conclusion about listening to council's dialogue. If council wants to see a preference for one or the other, or maybe even just a requirement, we are all ears.
I think that we really need to make it open and see what's out there. And if people want to give us a proposal taking title to the property, that's one. If they want to say no, something else, do that. But I don't think we should limit it at all. Remember, this is a very unusual RFP because whoever's taking this, there's no profit here, right? They're taking obligations. This is going to be a liability, and this is going to be an undertaking from them. So don't get enthusiastic about how many people are going to be willing to take on these kinds of obligations. It's going to be a very limited number of entities that would be. So we have to be, we want to get people to respond to this, right? So we want to make it as open as possible and give them the freedom to structure some kind of a proposal of their own. I think and I agree with Chris in saying, you know, let's see what folks can give us. Let's just put it out there and not make too many conditions on the start. We can always add conditions later. We can negotiate once somebody's responded.
Those are my questions. The other minor stuff, I'll contact the staff directly on. So
Okay.
go on.
Then Councilor Sheldon, I know you were eager.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. First, staff, great job on this thing. This is really great. I think you did a very nice job thinking this through and putting this together. And to that end, I have a handful of comments is all. I do have some stuff that I'll send under separate cover, but I have 6 main things here that should go through very quickly, I think. One is that I have a handful of suggestions that I will send. That's number 1. Number 2, under the proposals and approach, I know, Mayor, you just said we don't want to provide too many restrictions right now as a general rule. I would agree with that. I think there's one that needs to go in there unequivocally, though, right now, right out of the chute. I think we need to say that the proposers agree by submitting a proposal that they will not attempt to crack open the conservation easement. I feel strongly that that's something, and nobody should be wanting to do that, but I think we should go ahead and put that in here as an affirmative statement that when they submit their proposal, they agree to that.
I think at the end of B, doesn't it?
It does say that. Actually, it says that in here.
Yeah, look at the end of paragraph B.
It says you won't consider anything that requires removal of the conservation easement.
Oh,
Not that
thank
anybody
you.
can do that anyway.
Sorry, I missed it. Okay.
Dan, perhaps you could point that maybe even more than that there needs to be an affirmative statement that they won't. Not putting it in a proposal doesn't necessarily mean if you're silent, it doesn't say one thing or the other. Maybe there needs to be an affirmative statement of some sort.
I'm not going to try to lawyer this thing, nor should you, Katie, but I think Kathy will just need to make sure that whether it starts at the RFP or at the time that we are engaging with somebody or at the time that we're actually conveying either ownership or maintenance responsibilities or whatever, that legal will protect us, knowing that you're hearing from multiple members of council that we are very, not concerned, we are very protective of this deed of conservation easement. We want to make sure that it is honored and nobody even attempts to crack it open. Regarding, and Al touched on this, the ownership issue, I think if we say that ownership is not an option, I think we're going to lose a whole mess of potential bidders. So I would like to not specifically call out that ownership is not up for grabs. I would like to leave it kind of, as we've discussed and as staff's already got it in here, that it's somewhat nebulous and we want them to give us a proposal on what they propose. But as it relates to that, I think paragraph B, where you just pointed me to about not cracking open the conservation easement, that should tie very closely with the very first sentence of the very first introductory paragraph. That should say we're seeking sealed proposals from organizations or individuals that can manage and activate, but I think it should probably say that can potentially own, manage and activate, just so that they understand that that is available as a proposal if that's what they're seeking. So that was number 3. Number 4, I find that what I'm about to say is probably not necessary to say, but maybe it is, that they need to be out here and do a mandatory on-site visit. If they're going to bid on this thing, and if it's a group out of Chicago, they can't just bid on this thing unsolicited, not unsolicited, but without coming out on site. We are going to mandate that they come out and step foot on the property. I think it's almost doesn't need to be said that somebody would do that, but I think that that should be a requirement. As far as the evaluation process, we have right now, this RFP contemplates just council being the body to consider this after staff makes its recommendation. Do we want to potentially look at PTRC or P&Z being involved in that? I know it adds a whole nother layer of process and potentially presentations, but I just throw that out there for the rest of council to consider. And then finally, Ashton touched on this. I would very much encourage partnerships in this proposal, in this RFP, I think we should proactively state that, we would encourage you to reach out to other entities, groups, nonprofits, organizations that might have specialty in X, Y, or Z. And I don't know if we plant seeds or not, but typically they find each other. My experience is that if you're soliciting for a proposal in a general field, but it requires a few specialties within that, that general is going to go find those specialists and make them part of their team. But we might want to encourage that, actually proactively encourage it in here. That's it for my high level comments. I think you guys did a nice job, Chris. Thank you.
Councilor Gallagher, you have the floor.
Mute.
You're muted, Mike.
Gallagher, you're still muted. There you go.
My apologies. Great job, Chris and staff, in putting this together. As I look at it, there are so many opportunities with Quincy Farms in terms of the breadth of it. You can have people who will be highly involved, and you can have a scope of it that would not have that much involvement. And I know in our goal number 2, we talks about farm life and seeing farm animals. And I don't want that to, I want to give great flexibility. To Katie's point about goal number 3, you want to give them the opportunity to really focus on what they want to pull out of it. Is it farming? Is it the husbandry of animals? And I don't know if we need to change that wording at all, but that's just want it good and broad so that they can focus on what they want to focus on.
Councilor Gallagher, can I just
Yeah.
follow up with that just for a second? So, I think from our previous discussion about goal 3, trying to eliminate it feeling narrow and making that more broad, I think we all totally understand that. Are on goal 2, however, are you raising concerns that goal 2 also limits that opportunity and gives one the impression that the only theme or whatever you want to call it that might be considered as a farm theme? Are you suggesting that we should either add additional goal that opens it up more or change goal 2 so that it's not quite so restrictive?
Yeah, so the concern is, what if a group says, we don't want to have animals there. We want to focus on something, something else. We want to, or we don't want to be tied to, having cows or, anything like that. And that because that doesn't fit their budget, it doesn't fit their work schedule, et cetera. I know it's focusing on that historical rural setting, and perhaps having that in a format that allows flexibility.
Well, I will give council a heads up behind the curtain here. We wrestled mightily with this whole section. We didn't want to come up with this completely too rigid scoring system that would stifle creativity. But we wanted to give folks an idea of something, and we thought this goal approach would be a good way of doing it. Well, then you're faced with a new challenge. Well, what are the goals? And so we did attempt to leverage some already existing agreed upon goals. However, if we want to see changes to those, I would almost offer to you that staff would love to hear council's sort of one layer below this, some feedback on what that goal might be, that still provides that flexibility, but helps provide some direction at the same time. We spend a lot of time on this, so we would love to hear some thoughts.
My comment would be that if you look at just the physical plant, you've got animals are built into that. You almost don't even need to say that. Just if you just talked about a historical rural setting and the the life around that. And you've got all on the east side, you've got stables up and down. You've got a beautiful big barn. You've got, chicken coops. It sort of speaks for itself.
Are you okay with wildlife viewing and the bird viewing and all that stuff? Or is it just specifically?
I think it's a big step to go raise animals. I raise chickens. I've raised them for 20 years. And every day you got to have someone out there. And it is work. And someone has to do that. And if this is a proposal that where they go, we're not going to have the manpower. We are not comfortable with that. We don't want to run these people off if
Gotcha.
they don't want to be going down that road. So
Great. Thank you.
my other comment, I think it is in the section 3, the proposal and the feasibility, financial feasibility. I think the ability for whoever takes this on, they have to show their capacity to raise money. And that has to be done in a, there's reference to it, your anticipated grants, gifts, programs, partnerships. It's a huge deal in making this thing happen. And so I maybe that's enough right there, but it's, I know my eyes are going to be looking very closely at their ability to convince us that they can raise money to fund these wonderful programs and the farm itself.
Okay. Councilor Brown, you have the floor.
So I think most of my comments have already been brought up. On the first page in the first sentence, what in this context, given the Cora, et cetera, what is a sealed proposal? And what would that mean to perhaps an individual who doesn't generally respond to government RFPs?
I know Jay deals with these more than I do, so I'm going to let him, he's going to be better equipped to help understand why sealed proposals even are a thing. So, Jay, do you want to?
Well, and if I misspeak, City Attorney Guckenberger can fill in for me. We can probably take sealed proposals out. Because if you notice farther down in the document, we've document public. So we would put all of the responses online. So we'll look at that. A sealed proposal is when we're trying to stop certain contractors from knowing what prices are before the bid opens. So in this case, I believe it would not be needed. That's just a term, a sealed proposal.
It's almost like a habit, right, for an RFP.
Well, that's
Well, it's a little superfluous here. I think what Jay is saying is when we went on, we thought, well, we could give everybody the chance to give a public viewing, and sort of skip right past that issue. And the general principle obviously is to not have competitive advantages given, but this is a little bit of a different RFP, as has been before, and actually tonight discussed that partnerships would be encouraged. And so.
Well, and it would be difficult, this is also not going to have perhaps the traditional next step in an RFP. We might choose one, we might choose many, we might choose none. We might choose to have the top candidates, present in a public forum, which if it's sealed, we can't get any public feedback or input. And I didn't want to give anybody the impression to someone who doesn't, like I said, respond to RFPs all the time. Sealed proposal to me would mean something that's in direct conflict with Cora. And it's interesting because particularly as you're talking about financial information, and I know that they can mark things confidential and probably would. If you're talking about, personal financial ability to support this farm, that's probably not something that you want. And I believe when you put the word sealed proposal, someone would believe that that means that nobody else can see it. And so I just want to make sure that we're very clear with people what, that's only the case if they mark it confidential because of Cora, et cetera, et cetera.
And on your note about next steps and not typical, we actually went back and forth and talked about, should we call this something less than a request for proposal? Should we call it a request for statement of interest? Which is a rare, but not, non-existent creature. We settled on this one because we are looking for, I think, a proposal of some sort, not just, yeah, we're interested.
I'd like to do
So, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
interested. So that's where we are, but I just wanted to let you know, we are kind of thinking through all of those things as well.
And then,
Mayor Pro Tem Brown, your point is well made, and I think I think that makes sense. I think we should change that as well.
on page 10, section 4.0, I think we should add a bullet. We mention it in section 4.1, but I think financial viability should probably also be reiterated there. We say it down below, that we intend to focus on financial capacity. Interestingly, in that sentence, it's the first thing.
Yeah.
Above, it's not even really mentioned. And I think, I don't know how clear we need to be that doesn't mean that the person who says they're going to commit the most money wins, and that there is some degree of subjectivity to whether a plan is actually viable or not, in the very, very long term. And that, I don't know if that's just implied or if we need to kind of be specific that we're going to make our own assessment of how the financial viability of the plan meets, or it meets the requirements of the city or something along those lines.
Let us work on some wording. I think that's a great idea.
In the first paragraph of section 4.1, I think we need to be clear that we may not choose any of these proposals. It says we might choose more than one, and I think it should be clear that we're not committing to doing any of these things if none of them seem like the right fit. And I think that is pretty good. The bid system that we use, I guess it's free and whatever. I'm just thinking of, smaller organizations that, like I said, don't do this very frequently. I've never registered for that system. Is it burdensome? Are we asking people to go through a lot of bureaucracy just to give us a proposal? It's easy and okay. And free, right?
I'll let Jay speak to that, but I've signed up from time to time.
Okay.
I am before.
All right.
It's very simple to sign up. And the thing about that is if we don't know who has copies of the proposal, when we do a addendum or something changes and we need to send something out, that's the real reason we want to use that system, is so we are able to be in contact with all interested parties. So we don't have to have them come in, sign up, and then we have to email them every time there's an addendum. If they've signed up and opened the documents, every time there's an addendum, they automatically will get that in their email.
Okay. And then my last question has been addressed, but how are we going to publicize it? I don't think this is a case where we can just publish it on a bid website and expect that people will see it. I think we'll need to be a little more proactive about that and probably, come up with a list. And if any counselors or anybody listening, anybody has ideas, even if you don't think that group might be specifically interested, they may have partners that are, or, they may know of other people. So I would cast the net as broadly as we can think to, obviously, while remaining relevant. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Councilor Wheel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of minor comments. We've used the term groups a lot. But it seems to me we might want to reach out to individuals as well. I mean, there are a number of individuals who, excuse me, reside in the community, have a vested interest, and have certainly the wherewithal and maybe the desire for a legacy like this. So I'd just like to mention that and offer it up for consideration. I do also think that this process doesn't quite feel right if we have just one alternative ferreted out from all of those and that's presented to the council. It feels to me like it's a big enough deal with respect to the council and what we do and the magnitude of the asset and benefit to the community and so on, that somewhere those people who aren't directly involved in the selection process on the council ought to get, maybe should get a whiff of more than one of the applications. In terms of goals, I do think there is a goal about preserving, enhancing the asset itself that might be something we'd like to include in there.
Councilor Wheel, just to follow up on that, just for
did I miss something?
no, I was just going to say, when you talk about potentially adding a goal that talks about enhancing and preserving the asset, are you differentiating sort of the property itself from, a program or things like that? Are you highlighting the actual real estate itself?
Well, it's a, I think it's kind of a combination in a sense. That is, I don't think we'd want if you sort of step back and think about it from a community perspective, I don't think we'd want to let the physical property go into disrepair, nor the programming as well.
Okay, thank you.
It's really kind of a combination of both in a sense. I was probably a little more oriented toward the physical property, but I do think you raise a good point, Chris.
Okay, no, that's added clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. On the ownership of the property, now this may be a more matter of negotiating tactics and timing, but it does feel to me like we might want to at least provide a whiff that if ownership is contemplated, that there might be a right of revision if the plan's not committed. Because I think we'd like to filter out people who might say, wow, I can get my hands on a real neat piece of property and I'll figure out what to do with it later on. I mean, I can commit to all this stuff, but what's most important to me is that I have the property under my control. And I think, just giving some visibility that there's some recourse if things don't come to pass might be a little more upfront. Now, maybe the timing in a proposal, like a request for proposal, is not appropriate. Maybe we should bring it up later, but I feel somewhere in there we probably want to do that.
Yeah, let City Attorney Guckenberger and staff kind of kick that around. I think we even talked about that a little bit, about what point in the process do we start putting those kinds of terms or restrictions on a potential proposer. So
it's a little bit six one way, half a dozen the other. If we do it later, then we may be accused of not being upfront. On the other hand, we don't want to scare people off either that might have a reasonable proposal but might become very nervous about something like that. So I offer it up for consideration. And that is pretty much the notes I have. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilor Safavi, you have the floor.
Yes, I think we have, we heard a lot of good comments from everybody. I just have a few more to add. Look, I like this RFP that it gives a framework, but within this framework, I think where it's possible and when it's possible, we need to use a couple words that we also encourage creativity and thinking outside the box. You know, we as a team and other teams that we have been working with, you know, we sort of have talked about, well, this is the restriction, this is what we can do, this is the only thing we can do, but it would be nice to see, you know, I'm hoping these groups will come with different backgrounds and they may come up with some really neat ideas. So that is something that I think is important. So two things, again, where we can within this document we encourage partnership and we encourage creativity and thinking outside the box within this framework of course, what we're also providing to them. In terms of the selection committee, I think, Randy, you just mentioned that as well. This is such an important decision, and I just think that we need to have, when I look at the selection committee on page 10, composed of some key staff members, 2 members of city council, 1 Quincy Farm committee, I just feel like that might not be a big enough committee. And I really am looking at this. I don't want to make this complicated, but I feel like we need to have, you know, a good, probably, I don't know, 4 council members, you know, a couple of people from Quincy Farm, you know, somewhere maybe even a team of about up to even 10 people. Because this is important. We don't want to dismiss a proposal just because, you know, someone was, you know, myself, I might be biased against certain proposals, and that would not be right to dismiss that. So anyway, that's the one thing I really, when I looked at it, I think we need to think about that seriously. Last thing, Katie touched on this. There are a couple of things I want to add to it. The proposal evaluation criteria. The one that sort of bothered me was it says, what is the amount of time that will elapse before public access is provided? And to me, you know, if somebody comes in that has a really good plan, good financial stability, either puts on a trust or has a great track record for fundraising, I mean, everything is, you know, is great, but it says, you know, I have this thorough program. It's going to take a year before I open it up. I don't want that to be a negative thing, actually, rather than versus somebody who's going to come in and say, you know, I'm going to open this up in 3 months. So that time frame, I think, is something that we should encourage them to include it in their proposal. But I don't know if I want to put it as one of the key evaluation criteria. Now, when I look at this evaluation criteria, you know, I started thinking about what are the things that I would evaluate when I'm looking at a proposal. And I almost wanted to go, you know, I would say, I'm going to actually look at every section you noted here. And every one of those is important to me. So I don't know if you basically want to say this is based on the overall proposal, you know, and list all the 8, 9 sections, or if we're going to go ahead and put only 2 or 3 bullet points, I just worry about that. Because to me, again, all of that, sticking with the frame of work, the proposal, completing it, you know, meeting the commitment to the timeline that they, or what kind of timeline they come up with. Are they going to go ahead and they're the time of group that they're going to go reach out to other team and they promote partnership within the community? I mean, the list goes on and on. So anyway, I think this proposal evaluation criteria needs some more work. Other than that, I think it was really well written. That's all.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could, I do think that's a good, I think Councilor Savabi brought up a couple of extra points. I just want to clarify and maybe pull from all of council a little bit more related to those. And this also goes to Councilor Wheel's comment. I think what we had proposed or had in mind, at least, and maybe didn't write very clearly, was that the selection committee could do the, you know, sort of the legwork, but that the selection committee would absolutely report back, not just on a single person, you know, single proposer, but have an opportunity to have a full discussion with all of council about the process as a whole. all the proposers, why the selection committee made its recommendations. It could be, to Mayor Pro Tem Brown's point, it could be that the selection committee recommends no one. If they recommend no one, I hope they don't then therefore refuse to talk about, any of the interviews or processes or anything like that. So, we were trying to strike a balance between all of council. How can all of council be involved while still having a process that's somewhat familiar to folks who might be going through this about a more typical interview, almost presentation kind of process. We came up with this. However, all of council, please don't, this is not the end of the, this is solution to the universe here. We are certainly open for the process side of things.
Let me throw in my 2 cents worth since I'm last. I think you can delete this at this time. I don't think we need to decide what the process. I think it might depend on how many we get. We could revisit this issue after if we have a dozen, that's going to be different than if we have 2 or 3, right? And if we have 2 or 3, the whole council can do it, and we can do it. I don't know that we need to go in, and I don't think that the bidders or the people we're going to have respond are that conversant with these kinds of the construction RFPs or the normal. They don't know that process. I think they'd probably be happy just to say the city council will decide. So I think an easier way out is simply punt on this. That you can just delete it, and we can. There's no reason we can. A suggestion that we can do that later and not be tied down now to one particular process and that, because if we put it in here, then we have to follow it because that's what we said we're going to do. We may not want to do that after we see who's responded. And that's kind of one of my overall comments too, is some of these things can come out. We don't need to do all of this now, but I did want to follow up because I heard some really good things, and I agree very much with some of the comments here. And in my view, there's really 2 most important things. And one, that any proposal has to have, and one, it has to comply with the conservation easement. And that to me is, I guess I would put that in the goals, actually. I would like, as a goal, I would like to see a creative, interesting, plan that is beneficial to our community and, that complies with the conservation easement. And the second thing I'd want to say is that it has to be approved by Colorado Open Lands. That's a key. Without, you have a lot of plans, but if they're not going to be approved by Colorado Open Lands, then they're wasted. So they need to begin that dialogue and get on board with that. In my view, that would be preferable to the goals rather than citing these goals from the visioning plan. I think those are fine as examples, but I don't want to tie anybody to those. I know that there's certain discussion about people saying we want to have a museum, right? We want this property to focus on the history of the community in this area, and they wouldn't. That doesn't work here, right? That wasn't what the visioning committee was focused on, because they were thinking we're going to spend taxpayer money. Well, if somebody else is coming in to spend privately raised money, they may have different plan. And that may be a great plan, but we don't want to say you lose because you haven't complied with these 3 goals, right? So I don't want to limit them. And I go back to Chris, your first comment. We want to say what folks can give us. So I think as our goal, we want them to give us the goals. We want them to give us the goal, what they see for their vision for this property, and our criteria for which one is best is who's going to be able to. Are they really going to be able to fill that goal? Can they do it, right? And then that should just, in my view, should just be our selection criteria will be what's the best interest of the city, right? Don't tie us down right now to exactly what it's going to be, but we'll choose among these who has the best goals, who complies with the conservation easement, and what's the best interest of our citizens and our community. That's all we need to say. Normally you have selection criteria in these things, so contractors and everything say, hey, I'm getting a fair process, and if I'm a low bidder, I do this or that or that. That's how I'm going to win the thing. But that's not kind of our. We don't need to do that to people who are submitting these bids. All we need to tell them is, hey, we're going to take the best plan that somebody submits, and we'll look at everything. We'll look at whether you can do it, how it's going to benefit our community, our citizens, how you're going to fund it. all of those things. So I wouldn't tie us down right now and say, here's our criteria that's going to win and here's what's going to lose. Just leave it open. Best interest of the city. We're going to do this. So that would be my suggestion for handling goals. I think I'd be fine with saying these are examples of what the visioning committee had as goals. But if you have different goals and you think those are what you want to do and you want to focus on those, go for it. Knock yourself out, and we want to hear what you have to do. If you want to do the visioning committee goals, we'll hear that too. But I don't want to limit them to the visioning committee goals at this time. So those are my. Otherwise, great. I think it's a great job. Oh, as far as I think I mentioned on the review, I think city depending on. I don't think we're going to get a lot of responses. I mean, I hear a lot of people talking about doesn't. I think our task is to find somebody who will respond. I mean, if we just get a few, we're going to be jumping for joy. This would be great, and then we can do it. So I think I would also take out the financial information part right now. I just think somebody's going to look at that and say, I don't want to have to give up my personal financial information, to do this. We can ask for that later. I mean, if it turns out that they come to us with a proposal and it's based on their financial, we can say, hey, how are you going to assure us that this is going to work? But requiring everybody who responds to this to give us their financial information, I think it's just, I don't know that I hesitate to say people are going to look at that and say, I'm not going to, I don't want to go there. But it doesn't stop us from later getting back in and, asking those questions and saying, hey, if you really want, here's your proposal, we like it, but we want these conditions, right? We want this reverter. We want, we want to know how you're going to really do this. We want letters from people who say are supporting you. All those conditions can be attached later after the negotiations start. We just want them to give us a proposal to start the negotiation process.
So Mr. Mayor, I know that we're going to be tight on time here for a second. Yeah. So let me just follow up on a couple of your comments real quick. I think a selection criteria section that sort of has a different approach than the one that we have in here is, I think in a lot of ways makes a lot of sense. You want us to take a crack at sort of reworking that language? Is all of council good with that approach? I think it has merit.
I think great idea.
So I think what we'll do is we'll retype that section up as wow us and then see what we get.
Yeah. Yes. I think I like that. Wow us. Really.
Yeah. But I do think the financial part is I can see that as well. And we certainly, again, staff was certainly envisioning sort of a multi-step process. So I do think we could ask for that later. We wrestled with that ourselves. We put that in really based on some comments from council about that. So I guess I would appreciate maybe a little more consensus, one direction or the other. We are willing to do either. So
I really would like to push that later. I mean, if it's a nature conservancy, we don't need to ask, we won't need it, right? If it's Bill Gates Foundation, I mean, we're not going to need to ask for it. So I think we, save it. And if it's really relevant to the particular proposal, then we can go back and say, hey, we need more. And I think we need to make that more clear here too, that we certainly reserve the right to go back and ask for additional information and different assurances and things like that. Yeah.
I think that's right.
Chris, I got one quick question. To me, it would seem a very important element is their motivation. Why are they doing this? Why do they want to do this project? Why do they want to do it? Why do they need to have control of the ground? There's all those types of things. And I don't see anywhere in here where we talk about why they want to do it. I think I don't know if you add that in somewhere in the evaluation process.
No, we could add it in the submittal requirements. That's easy enough. I absolutely.
I'd like to know
what's their vision, right? And what are they hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, why do they want to do this? What is their motivation? I think that's critical.
All right, we only have 1 minute before we have to start the council meeting. Sorry, everybody, but that was a good discussion. I appreciate it.
Something to my mind real quick not for people who are reading it to respond, but for the benefit of the public who might be reading this and interested in it. I feel pretty strongly that we need to make reference that there will be opportunities for public input before any decision is made.
Absolutely.
Even though we haven't determined necessarily what that path looks like, we will commit to it today.
Very explicit that we're not, it is not, in my opinion, an option that we would choose one and enter into a contract without anything else.
I would agree.
I would-
Good point, Katie.
Everybody, good point, Katie.
Probably
Everybody.
best to put potential proposers on notice that there will be a process like
There'll be a
that. at
public
some time.
process. We are a
Yeah, I would agree.
transparent and open process, and
Very good.
very good. All right, it is 6:30. Are we ready already to?
We're just gonna let in, we have some people in the waiting room
Okay.
that are here for audience participation, so we're
I
just gonna get them admitted and
I need to find my
admitted
agenda.
in just a moment.
I'm not sure when we will bring this back before council in a more hopefully final version. But I will say if council can send their red lines to staff, that will help dictate. If you don't have red lines, let us know so that we know we're not still waiting on those so that we can get working on a final document to get it then scheduled for city council.
End of the week, or what would you think?
8 a.m. tomorrow.
whatever
I was thinking-
works for
I was thinking 8
council.
PM tonight.
This guy's.
As quickly as possible, I guess I would say. I hate to dictate your schedule, so.
Laura, are we ready?
I believe, yes, we have everyone in from the waiting room. We are ready to go.
All right, I have 6:31. I will now call to order the Tuesday, February 2nd meeting of the Cherry Hills Village City Council. We just concluded a study session, but this will be the regular meeting. So let's have a roll call of members. Laura, please.
Counselor Safavi,
Here.
Counselor Wheel,
Glad to be here.
Counselor Brown,
Here?
Counselor Gallagher,
Here.
Counselor Sheldon,
Also glad to be here.
Counselor Blum.
Here.
Great. All counselors are present. I believe we have some folks signed up, citizens signed up for audience participation. Is that right, Laura? Oh, here we go.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Leviton.
Good evening, City Council and Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your time. Just had a few things I wanted to bring up. I turned the page with the year and everything changing, and I'm getting back to work from the comfort of my office. Saw the groundhog saw shadow today, so hopefully we'll get 6 more weeks of winter because we really need more water, which brings me into my first initiative. It's called a wilderness initiative, quote unquote, because wilderness, I've been poring over laws and casework, and wilderness is just barely defined. So what does that mean? Well, in my belief system, in order to maintain a semi-rural community, some parts of open space should not be maintained and left alone. Now, since the public, us, Quincy Farm, PTRC, and you at City Council, holds such a tiny percentage of land, the main thrust of my wilderness initiative is going to be privately based. We've dedicated 10% of our land to be unmaintained for wildlife's sake. And I know we can do a lot more. So I'll keep you up to date with that wilderness initiative. I don't know how far I can go, how long it's gonna take, but thank you all for listening to me. And I hope I can get a lot of community support for it. Next, I have what's called the Dark Sky City. We actually could qualify already. I looked it up, our section in the city code, section 16.4.120, essentially already designates us as a dark sky city. The process actually takes longer through the nonprofit, which is Dark Sky City Association, I believe, some other nonprofit like that. And all we have to do is prove to them that we hold the common values of having dark skies in our community, unknown to staff, to parks staff. There is no minimum requirement for how much light is actually making it to our community. All we can do is have it in our code and stand for the dark sky, how dark it actually is. I know we're surrounded by a bunch of other communities that aren't that dark, so wouldn't be the same as out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a start. And that's all I got. I hope I can get some support for that. Any questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Leviton. Appreciate your thoughts and speaking tonight.
Okay, thank you as well.
And your service on our committee. We appreciate it.
Glad to work hard. Thank you for your work as well.
Next, Earl.
Earl has not joined. He wasn't sure if he was actually going to join. It was just an in case.
After he sat through our study session, he's probably taking a nap.
And our entire retreat today.
Yeah, retreat.
Sleep right now.
Okay, Mayor Crispin.
Laura, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Right.
She's on mute.
You're on mute, Laura.
Laura, it looks like you just joined with your phone. If you dial *6, it will unmute you.
She probably hasn't taken a breath since she started
Okay,
speaking.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Laura Chrisman, 18 Cherry Lane Drive. I was initially very pleased with the RFP proposals, concept, until today, when I read the mayor's report in the Village Crier. It is set up and entitled City Council Direction for Requests for Proposals. So it is set up as what the city positions are. And then, and I would encourage all of you to read it, it then is a very, very aggressive advocacy for the Anderson proposal. It even references it. It then states that there are all these questions and these are the answers, not these are the mayor's opinions as to what the answers may be. These are the answers. I will say, I will just give one example of why these perhaps are not the answers. It says the existing, in the mayor's report, it says the existing master plan does not address Quincy Farm. Quincy Farm was donated to the city in 2007. The existing master plan was adopted by the city in July of 2008. One of the expressed goals of the master plan, current master plan, is to increase and protect the amount of village, with emphasis added, owned open space. There is nothing in here about gifting property. I mean, it is clearly part of our master plan to protect owned property and increase it, not decrease it. I believe that this advocacy report is so biased that it not only will make it difficult for any party responding to the RFP, I would argue that it will in fact discourage people from responding to the RFP. You read this and it is clear that the city's made its decision. I'm not saying that the city has made its decision, but to an outsider, to someone who is a not-for-profit, they don't want to spend the money for no purpose. So I agree with the mayor. You'll be lucky to get any responses on this. I agree with Kathy. The general goal is to not give a competitive advantage in the RFP process, but a competitive advantage that I do not think you can overcome has already been given. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Crispin. I'm sorry we lost our screen, Laura.
Sorry.
Oh, I guess I have, yeah. Was it
There we go.
Jenny?
Jenny's next.
Jenny Carpenter, the Land Preserve.
Hi, everybody. My name's Janie Carpenter at 9 Random Road, and I am board president of the Cherry Hills Land Preserve. I just wanted to briefly just say thank you, city council members, for your time and effort, and for staff for all of your effort to design a RFP process and to try to come up with the best possible solution for our community. The Land Preserve looks forward to submitting a proposal and to working with the city to design the best possible solution for the community. And we hope to preserve, we want to collaborate with everyone who shares that goal of preserving Quincy Farm as a wonderful community asset for the long-term future. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all your work on the preserve. Next, we have Natalie Anderson.
Hi, everyone. Natalie Anderson. I live at 160 South Pennsylvania Street. I've written a letter, which I'd like to read, but it will take longer than 5 minutes. So I'll just be reading excerpts of the letter, and I'll try to stick to the time allotted, but I hope that you'll all read the letter in its entirety and the attachments, which I will be sending after this. I'm speaking tonight to correct the record from the January 19th, 2021 City Council meeting, specifically as it relates to comments made by Mayor Russell Stewart that Natalie Anderson proposed to the mayor that the family take ownership of Quincy Farm. In his comments in the City Council meeting, the mayor referenced 2 meetings attended by Natalie that will be discussed below. Natalie disputes the mayor's recollection of these events. In addition, we'd like to provide an update on the Anderson Family Management Plan. On Monday, July 20th, Clausina Vanderwerf, Lucinda Green, and Natalie Anderson met on the east side of the farm in the barnyard. Contrary to the mayor's comments, this meeting was called by Lucinda, not Natalie. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss the Quincy Farm Committee's recent trip to Calf Lowell Ranch in Castle Rock, which Natalie joined. Natalie, Lucinda, and Clausina discussed the city's master plan and brainstormed potential ways to incorporate elements of the CAF program into the Quincy Farm plan. At no point during this meeting did Clausina and Lucinda solicit a proposal from the Anderson family, nor did Natalie propose a transfer of ownership of the farm to the family. The transfer of ownership of the farm was not discussed at all during this meeting. We understand that if they have not already, Clausina and Lucinda will also be submitting comments correcting the mayor's statements. For good measure, a screenshot of Lucinda's invitation to meet with Natalie and Clausina is attached. On the following day, July 21st, Mayor Russell Stewart, Jerry Neff, and Natalie met on the west side of the farm on Jerry's patio. For context, this meeting had been called by Jerry and Natalie after the city's draft master plan received significant critical public feedback. Jerry and Natalie wanted to understand the city's path forward given the lack of public support for the plan. During this meeting and general discussion around the future of the farm and draft master plan, Mayor Stewart asked Natalie if her family would be interested in taking back the farm. If she is not already, we understand that Jerry Neff will be submitting a statement to reflect her recollection of these events, which we believe will be consistent with this letter. For good measure, we've also included a screenshot of the text message exchange between Mayor Stewart and Natalie following this meeting, where Natalie references sharing the news of the mayor's proposal with the family. After Natalie had the opportunity to consult with the entire family and they confirmed interest in exploring a transfer, Natalie, her attorney Melinda Beck, Jerry Neff, Chris Kramer, Kathy Guckenberger, and Russell Stewart had a meeting at City Hall to discuss next steps. During this meeting, Melinda specifically made the observation that Natalie was approached by the city regarding the possibility of the family taking the property back. And so it might be more appropriate to have the proposal be a joint proposal with the city instead of giving the impression that the family had made an unsolicited request to take back the property. Chris Kramer responded that although he understood Melinda's comment, he believed a proposal from the family to the city would be more appropriate. Finally, Natalie confirmed this series of events publicly on the record during the October 20th, 2020 council meeting in response to Councilor Brown's questions about who approached her from the city. Mayor Stewart made no comment. We are not concerned with whether the mayor was acting on his own or if he was acting on behalf of the council. The importance of that issue is for the city to determine. Furthermore, while the initial conversation to facilitate a potential solution may have only included Mayor Stewart, all subsequent meetings to discuss a potential transfer to the family included city representatives in some capacity, whether that be city staff, the Quincy Farm Committee, or city council. As you likely recall, the family was given less than a month to submit our management plan at the city's request and subsequently presented the plan in October at council's request. We trust this letter and the supporting documentation attached clarifies our recollection of events. We do not appreciate the mayor's misrepresentation of events at the family's expense and the attempt to change the narrative to suggest the family approached the mayor or the city. Our only guess as to why council finds the July meetings relevant is because they realize, as aptly pointed out by Councilor Brown, given that we were approached by the mayor and then submitted a proposal at the city's request and at significant expense, we are frustrated. Considering the annual operating costs, which from our experience are a minimum of $250,000 a year, and the $7 to $8 million in deferred maintenance costs identified by the city, we believe the offer to take the property back and fund this project while sharing it with the community was quite generous, particularly in light of the fact that our family donated the property in the first place. To date, our proposal has not received a response from the city. Instead, we've been faced with questions about who our family is, our ability to operate a property we own for over 50 years, and what our intentions are. We believe a more valuable line of inquiry would be what are the motivations of those that have no connection to the property, no connection to our family, and no experience managing a property of any size that are seeking to take title to the property. While we have always understood and supported that community input would be a critical component of this process, we did not enter this process with competitive intent. Had we have known from the beginning the city was later going to divest the property through an RFP process, we would not have submitted our proposal in October. The fact that our proposal is now available to the public while RFP proposals will potentially be sealed is inherently unfair to our family. For the reasons stated above, we will formally be withdrawing our management plan. We will instead focus our energy and resources in supporting Colorado Open Lands and defending the easement, which we trust that they will do vigorously. In terms of the RFP itself, we continue to see evidence that the city does not understand the original intent of the gift or the terms of the conservation easement. Public access continues to be the crux of this issue, as it has been since the property was donated, and we have done our best to clarify the point in the letter. Can I just speak for a few more minutes? I know it's been 5 minutes.
Yes, I'll allow you that to speak a few more minutes.
The original intent of the easement and Cat's vision for the property were far more limited in terms of public access than the city's vision for the property. We understand why the very high operating costs of continued ownership cannot be justified by the city in light of the limitations on access and use of the property. It seems the city was not fully aware of the obligations or costs associated with the gift when they accepted it. We originally agreed to step forward last summer because we do feel a sense of responsibility for making a gift which is so limited in nature as to feel burdensome. However, the city cannot impute an intent which never existed or expect RFP respondents to provide a level of public access that the city itself received pushback on, both during the city master plan process and in the city's attempt to open the west side of the property. We find it only fair that if the property were to be transferred back to our family, it would be under the same terms by which we donated the property originally. On a personal note, the last 5 years have caused our family a great deal of heartache. We cannot help but feel that our good intentions have been taken advantage of and are dismayed that the farm has been caught in the middle of political feuds, which seem to be influenced by factors beyond simply what is best for the farm and the original intent of the gift. Much discussion has been had around what the residents of the village would want. But the question that we believe is the most important, and the one that hasn't been asked, is what would the citizen who donated this property want? What would Kat say if she was here today? By virtue of your position on council, you have a great deal of power in making this decision. While we understand this gift may not have lived up to your hopes for use of the property, we believe after 5 years, it's time to accept the current situation for what it is and move on, not double down on past arguments and throw more time at this process or money at a plan that receives such significant pushback from the community. No matter how long everyone has lived in Cherry Hills Village, They will never have the same connection to this property or appreciation for its history, for our family's history, that we do. Our investment in this property is 50 years and 3 generations deep. If your true goal is to select the best steward for this property for the next 50 years, we believe the path forward is clear. Thank you.
Okay. Natalie, thank you for your words. We will read your letter. Next speaker, Jerry Neff.
Hi, everybody. And mine's going to go a little longer as well. And mine's also a letter which I will be afterwards emailing to all of council and to Chris Kramer. Dear Cherry Hills Village City Council, I'm writing to correct the record from the January 19th, 2021 Cherry Hills Village City Council meeting, specifically as it relates to comments made by Mayor Russell Stewart regarding the initial meeting in which the transfer of ownership of Quincy Farm to the Anderson family was brought up, as well as one meeting prior to that date and follow-up meetings concerning the transfer. I also want to make clear my use of the word city. I use it in a broad sense to refer to anyone who is in a paid or elected or volunteer position within the city government, and in whatever capacity they hold, they represent the city government. As you will see below, the sequence of events made it clear to me that more than one person who works for, either in a paid, elected, or volunteer capacity, had discussed the possibility of transferring Quincy Farm back to the Anderson family prior to the subject being discussed with Natalie. Why would events have unfolded as they did otherwise? Thursday, January 16th, 2020, I asked to meet with Council Member Dan Sheldon to discuss a path forward after the negative public feedback of the city's draft master plan. We met at my house at 10:30 a.m. One of the options discussed was the possibility of a survey of alternate plans to the city's plan. At the end of our conversation, Dan mentioned that if some sort of resolution to a plan could not be settled upon in a few months' time, he would suggest the city think about giving up the farm. Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. Natalie and I had asked to meet with Mayor Russell Stewart with regards to the concerns surrounding the city's draft master plan for the farm. We wanted to understand in more depth how the city was going to move forward. We met at 9:30 a.m. at my house. During the meeting, which began as a general discussion of the farm's future, Mayor Stewart asked Natalie if the Anderson family would be interested in taking back possession of Quincy Farm. On Tuesday, August 4th, 2020, at Mayor Stewart and City Manager Chris Kramer's request, a meeting was set up to discuss next steps forward regarding the transfer. In attendance were Mayor Stewart, City Manager Chris Kramer, City Attorney Kathy Guckenberger, Natalie, her attorney Melinda Beck, and myself. The meeting took place in council chambers at 3:30. A timeline for moving forward was discussed, and the city requested a letter of interest from Natalie's family. Wednesday, September 20th, 2020, another meeting with the city to discuss dates for a management plan, et cetera, to be presented. Also held in city council chambers at 3:30 p.m. Tuesday, September 15th, 2020, I met with a handful of residents of the Cherrydale neighborhood at the Village Center with Mayor Stewart in attendance. I presented the new direction the farm was taking as a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, and they were very supportive and really liked the idea of a working farm across the street from them. Thursday, September 17th, 2020. At Natalie's and my request, Mayor Stewart arranged a meeting, which was via Zoom at 1 p.m., with Headmaster Rand Harrington and Jerry Walker at Kent Denver School to discuss the possibility of partnering in educational programs at Quincy Farm, not only for the academic year, but to include their breakthrough program in the summer. This was something they had been wanting to do for several years. We discussed several lesson plans we had come up with, and they were very excited about becoming a part of the growth of Quincy Farm. Subsequent events. Since the initial meeting with Mayor Stewart asking about the possibility of Natalie and the Anderson family taking back the farm, Natalie and her family have spent untold hours, effort, and money on making this possibility a reality. Deadlines were set by the city with regards to when certain documents were due, and not only were those deadlines met, the family provided more than was asked for. Natalie presented her management plan to City Council on October 20th, 2020, and never did receive a response from the city as to next steps forward. There was never a date presented for the transfer, never a request for more documentation, Nothing until late in December when the Cherry Hills Land Preserve suddenly decided they wanted to put in a proposal. Everything came to a halt and the city again changed direction, dropping the idea of a survey and deciding to go with an RFP instead. If the city had wanted to entertain any and all proposals, they should have thought about it at the same time Natalie was approached and done the RFP at that time. But to string Natalie and the Anderson family, from which this gift of the farm came, along for these many months, then suddenly change the plan is deplorable. To have accepted this gift that Kat so generously bestowed to the city and then subsequently treat it, her granddaughter, and her family this way is beyond comprehension. No one is even considering what is best for the farm and its rich history, because it is all about greed and the perception of how many millions of dollars the property is worth. In the meantime, the historic buildings are falling into a terrible state of disrepair and the land remains lifeless. The city is so concerned about public access, all the while forgetting that the land comes with a limiting conservation easement, which some misguided citizens think can be broken, opening up the land for development and their own monetary gain. One citizen who is presenting a plan in the name of the Cherry Hills Land Preserve recently contacted a member of my family about the possibility of investing and alluded to the fact that the easement might be broken. Now, why else would someone be thinking along those lines if it weren't for their own personal gain? A few months prior to contacting my family member, this individual told me the same thing in so many words and said that if the city would sell it for a few million, he would snap it up and break the easement. That certainly isn't an honest way to present their plan with its underlying hidden personal agenda. Another citizen seems to think that the city should not give up this quote unquote valuable asset. So her solution is to bulldoze all the buildings, but the two that are protected under the National Register designation, and turn a blind eye to all who would wish to wander here. Is that what the city wants to be a part of? Ruining an incredible piece of history and a farm loved by so many people. But you'd get your public access, wouldn't you? And you could lay claim to your valuable asset. Another citizen thinks the Anderson family doesn't deserve the farm back because they already made enough money on it in the first place. This horrible comment comes from a person who never even met Kat Anderson nor anyone in her family and has no idea what she is talking about. These are but a few examples of the greed that from the supposedly concerned citizens. Not one of these people has ever suggested something positive for the farm. When I researched and wrote the National Register nomination with my mother alongside Kat as she was creating the conservation easement, we all felt assured that the future of Quincy Farm would be protected, but now nothing could be farther from the truth. If these scenarios are what people are coming up with. By disrespecting the conservation easement, everyone is completely ignoring Kat's wishes and the intent of her incredible gift and trying to make it into their own vision, not Kat's. No one in the city has ever mentioned doing what is right for the farm. It is always doing what is right for the city. Has anyone stopped to consider that perhaps doing what is right for the farm would be the same as doing what is right for the city? It would be a win-win situation. It sometimes takes courage to do what is necessary, and how much more time and money will be wasted while the city decides what to do. Doesn't the city have other business it could devote time, energy, and money to instead of constantly in a state of flux regarding Quincy Farm? It has already been over 5 years, and here the city is going down yet another path with another committee trying to find a solution, while they have all shown complete disrespect for the plan presented them, a plan that they requested. If Kat Anderson could see what has happened to her beloved farm, a farm she took such great care of for over 60 years, with its buildings falling into a sad state of disrepair, her special gardens ripped up and replaced, and a general lack of concern surrounding it all, she never would have left Quincy Farm to Cherry Hills. Instead, she would have entrusted it to a group or organization who would have appreciated the legacy and history of what they were getting, understood and honored the conservation easement, had the finances to care for it in the manner it so deserves, and through careful planning would have made it available to the people to share. That was her simple wish.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Is there we have any other speakers for audience participation?
No.
Nope. Then let's move on to agenda item 4, reports from city boards, commissions, and committees. We have none, I take it, Laura?
Correct.
Consent agenda, approval of minutes. Is there a motion or a?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second,
Second by Counselor Wheel. Let's see, we need a roll call because we're on Zoom.
Counselor Safavi,
Yes.
Counselor Wheel,
yes.
Counselor Brown,
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher,
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon,
Yes.
Counselor Blum.
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. We have no unfinished. Actually, we have a very short agenda. We have reports. I'll be a very short report. I wanted to give a shout out to our city attorney for the work she did on the contracts for the judges, and say that I'm going to send those on to CML as potential models and templates for them to use around. I thought she did excellent work, so I wanted to give her commendations for the job that she did. And also, I think the work you did on the memo regarding the sales tax was excellent as well. So I just wanted to give you a compliment on
Thank you,
that.
Mayor. I very much appreciate that. It's a pleasure to continue to help this council do its business.
All right, other reports, Councillor Blum.
Well, let me defer to Counselor Brown. Want to go first?
Yeah, I'd like to start if possible. I have to admit, I'm not even really sure where to start in light of the comments that we've heard. Briefly, I'd just say that, I agree with former Mayor Chrisman that I was outraged by the editorial article in the Crier that was presented as the position of council, when in fact, I don't recall voting on any of those positions. I'm also continue to be very concerned in light of what Natalie and Jerry Neff have conveyed about commitments that were made to them inappropriately. Those are both conversations that need to be had perhaps in another time. Tonight, I want to bring up a different issue. In the past few weeks, several council members have approached me with concerns about the mayor's overreach and inappropriate conduct. In this case, it was specifically as it relates to the legal liaison position and the city attorney. Because this is an individual conduct issue, at the request of my colleagues, I attempted to address this with the mayor privately and individually in hopes that he would voluntarily correct the problem. But he insisted that this be brought to a public council meeting. So here it goes. At the organizational meeting in January of 2019, the council approved liaison appointments in keeping with our liaison policy. At the time, the mayor proposed acting as the legal liaison, presumably because he had previously held that position when he was on council in years before. The council noted at the time that there was no legal liaison position anymore, and it was discussed, but the council declined to act to create or appoint a legal liaison. Sometime after that, unbeknownst to the council, the mayor decided to circumvent the council and appoint himself to a legal liaison position anyway. And then, again without the consent of council, he used that self-appointment position to task the city attorney with projects, to insist on reviewing all the city attorney invoices, and even to suggest that he be included on all communication from the city attorney. Not only is that gross overreach, but it violates the expectation of confidentiality that all council members should have in dealing with the city attorney. In our council manager form of government, all responsibilities of the mayor, with the exception of running the meetings and voting in case of a tie, are delegated to the city manager. The council is the sole supervisory and decision-making body. The mayor does not have the authority to make unilateral appointments, to direct staff without the concurrence of council, and in light of these other comments, to represent the city's position without the concurrence of council. In my conversation with the mayor, he insisted that reviewing the city attorney's invoices and knowing what she's working on is a best practice, and I agree. That's why the city attorney attends all council meetings in person to report to us what she is working on. And that's why all invoices are reviewed by the city manager to whom that responsibility was delegated. That is the way our city administration works. And I believe that it's effective. Since this problem seems to have arisen from a lack of specificity and perhaps a desire to avoid confrontation, let me be very clear and very direct. The issue I am raising is not about whether there's a legal liaison or not, or who it is. That's easily solved. There is no legal liaison in our policy, period. The issue I'm raising tonight is the conduct of the mayor in circumventing the council and overstepping his authority to appoint himself to a position that he created, and in doing so, even further overstepping his authority by micromanaging the city attorney and usurping the duties that have been delegated to the city manager. And in doing that, whether purposefully or not, violated the confidentiality of the attorney-client relationship. I believe the majority of council feels that this conduct is unacceptable and needs to stop. I'd like to thank the city attorney for her professionalism throughout everything and express my confidence in the job that she has done for the city. But I would also like to emphasize that the city attorney reports to the city council, not the mayor. And if these issues persist, I would like to be notified. I was hoping that this could be addressed in a more sort of professional, individual way. But if this is what needs to happen, then that is what I have done.
Thank you. And I'll take an opportunity to respond. I think I've talked to several of the council members. Let me start first with the liaison position. And it is true that we don't have one, and I, mea culpa if I thought I was, and I have no interest in being, if somebody else will be liaison, I do think it's best interest of best practices in cities to have a legal liaison. When I was legal liaison, and that requires, and the responsibilities of legal liaison is to attend court sessions, trials, and settlement conferences as a representative of the city. So that's the major responsibility. And as legal liaison, when I was on council, I attended many of the South Suburban litigation issues and the mock trials, and then also the settlement of the church case that we had, the Lupa case. So, and I've talked to Councilor Blum about this, and I've said absolutely. And Councilor Blum is interested in that position. I would absolutely support him and anybody else. It's no prize to be legal liaison. It's going to take, it will take time. Hopefully, we won't be in any litigation, and it won't require much work. So that's my, to the extent I thought I was legal liaison, that's my fault. I didn't realize that it had been dropped as a assignment, apparently under, I'm not sure when, but it doesn't really matter, under Mayor Christman. But my recollection is that Tisdale was before I was, and then I was. Then it should be, it helps be an attorney. So I think Councilor Blum would be an excellent legal liaison. If the city wants to do it, I think it's up to council. If you don't want a legal liaison, you don't have to. I think best practices is to have one in the case that we have a litigation need, and that person to liaison with our city attorney. As far as the bills and the, I think there's a misunderstanding about who our city attorney reports to. She reports to the mayor and to the council. She is our attorney. Okay. Everybody on council has a right. She has an obligation under her professional code of responsibility to inform all of us of what she's doing and keep us informed. She can do that through being here and sitting at our meetings, and she can, and that's fine. It's also our it's also our responsibility to supervise her because she works for us. There is no attorney-client relation between city attorney and city manager. That doesn't exist. The city attorney represents the mayor and the council members and the entity. So everybody here does have a right to see her bills because that's the work she's doing for us. So I wouldn't advise everybody to take it on and review them and micromanage it. And I haven't done that. And you can ask her whether I've micromanaged her, and she's here to answer that question. But I don't think that's a fair characterization. But I think that all of us have a direct attorney-client relationship with our city attorney, and she has a duty to keep us informed of what she's doing at all times.
But Russell, I think what Katie was saying is that having a legal liaison breaches that attorney-client privilege between a council member and our city attorney. If I'm communicating with city attorney on a matter, on a personnel matter, and she has to copy you in on all correspondence and communication, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a privilege.
No, that's misunderstanding. The privilege is between the city attorney and all of us, and we get to know. So if you're asking the city attorney about something, we all get to know, because it has to be city business. You can't ask her to do your own will or sales transaction, but it's all city business, and we are entitled. She must inform us of what she's doing for all of us. She represents the entity, and she represents all of us.
Can I ask a quick question here?
And that privilege, the attorney-client privilege, is in all communications between the attorney and every member of council.
I'm gonna ask you a
Let me
question.
make a couple of comments, Russell, if I can. Number one, this came up in and I was totally unaware that there had been a legal liaison. I know that never been, and I've been on council for almost 5 years now, that there was a legal liaison. I understood there was never a legal liaison, period. As far as a couple things, this came to my attention when I'd asked a question or asked some information, a little legal research on some issues with the city attorney, and then was told, well, whatever I got would go to Russell, the mayor. Now, it wouldn't go to Dan or Mike or anybody else. It would go to him as, quote, the legal liaison. That's when I first became aware of it. Number one. Number two, I have no desire to be a legal liaison. My wife was on city council 10, 12 years ago, and there were several people involved in council who had to sit in and got involved in the litigation that was going on at that time. Again, that was any member of council. If there's a lawsuit or something, a trial thing that we have to attend, any member of council can do that. I think there's enough business experience and enough life experience with the current members of council that any one of us could sit in and participate in that as needed. The other concern I've got is, and this has come up in prior mayors and prior city councils, where we're trying to micromanage a staff member, which is totally out of line. Again, that relates, I think, and I agree 100% with Katie on this, that any bills that the city attorney spends should not go and be reviewed by any member of council. That goes to, that's why we have a city manager to handle that stuff. My biggest concern after listening to Katie, which I agree 100% with, is the potential for violation of confidentiality. And I disagree with the mayor, the fact that it goes to everybody. It may end up going to everybody, but if I ask a question or have to have something researched, there's no reason why it directly goes to a, quote, legal liaison. That's my information. I can present it. If anybody wants the information, they can go to the city attorney and get copies of it or whatever they need to do. So again, that came to my attention in a certain situation where it happened previously. Again, I was never aware, and I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that, but there was a legal liaison. This came up in one, and it goes back with the mayor back to, I think, the first year our mayor was here, where he was doing legal work for the city, which to me, and I thought we dealt with it at that time, that legal work, and we appreciate it, but the legal work should be done by our city attorney and not by any member of council or the mayor. And I thought we had dealt with it at that time. The concept did not come up at that point about a legal liaison. And now that it's out in the open, I think I feel strongly, I don't know how the other council members feel, but we do not need a legal liaison. We do not need somebody that's going to micromanage on behalf of Chris Kramer, his duties. And I think Chris is more than competent of handling that. And I totally support the statement that Katie made And Dan, I think you raised the same point. And that's my sense on this matter.
I think there's a difference that everybody should be aware of micromanaging an employee of Chris, which is I agree with you. That's true because they report to Chris. We do not want to be out there running the street sweepers or the snow plows or telling employees what to do. That's not proper. If we have an issue with staff, we talk to Chris and we don't interfere and we don't go to that staff member. Our city attorney is different. Our city attorney is our direct attorney. She reports to us and we all have ability to approach her. We all have the right to ask her for assistance. I'm not sure, Al, I wasn't doing legal work for the city. Do you recall what that was? I mean,
I'm trying to remember, Russell. That was 4 years ago. I think it was drafting some legal documents that, and we'd have to go back to the minutes, but I think it was early on in the time that we were on council together that you had drafted some legal documents. And I think it came up at that time. We have to go back to the minutes, but you had drafted some stuff and we said, no, that's more appropriate for the city attorney to do, even though you had offered to do that gratis.
Oh, I recall drafting a resolution. I think that is what you're referring to, but everybody on council, all council members are entitled to draft their resolutions if they want to. There's no requirement the city attorney draft resolutions. City council can do it. Often they want to have Kathy help them in the resolution, but they can certainly draft it. I think that's what you're referring to. That's not legal work for the city. I wasn't performing any legal, I never have performed legal work for the city.
Hey, Russell, my comments would be that, and I think we've seen enough evidence of it now, that there's a real opportunity to make sure that that your personal comments are not the comments of the council. And that we got to work on that because it's going to get you in hot water. It sends out disinformation and we get negative feedback from people. And so I think there's a real opportunity there. Russell,
yeah, and you should call me out.
Be very careful.
That's it. I try to be very careful about what my views are, and I never say that the council has done this or the council has done that. What Laura Crispin said in that introduction, I did say that properly, I think accurately, that our council actually made a decision to proceed, forward with an RFP discussions, and I think that's accurate. So, but that's the rest of that of my column is my views. It says it's the mayor's column, and that's my views of the matter. So, I certainly never intend to speak on behalf of council in my mayor's columns.
Yeah, I think part of it is people's perception become their reality, and so that's where the rub is. So that's all.
Couple of, I mean, there's a whole lot of different issues, I suppose, but a couple of thoughts. When I was in corporate America, if somebody incurred a cost for a service, they were involved in approving the bill. I didn't want to have disconnects between, bills going to one person who might not know whether they were incurred, what the magnitude ought to be. They weren't informed. So in order to avoid that, I would always have the cost causer approve the bill first, and then it would go to finance and paid. So I'm not so sure how that would work if all of the bills go to Chris, and yet as a council, we're creating the legal work. So that feels like a little bit of a disconnect, and yet I think that's among the more trivial of the points, at least my take on it. And then I also don't understand this attorney-client privilege breach. If Kathy's working on behalf of the council, it feels to me like there's, things going on where an individual council member is working with the city attorney and somehow the rest of the council's not privy to that. And that doesn't make me feel particularly comfortable if that council member is working on behalf of the city and engaging, and yet we're not informed. So I'm a little confused about where the boundaries of attorney-client privilege are in that, in this issue.
Can I give you a hypothetical example?
Sure.
What if I think a council member has broken the law?
Well, that's an interesting question.
I should be able to consult with our city attorney to see if there's any basis for that without that council member being notified that I was asking. Not making any accusations, I'm inquiring. And if someone is, being harassed.
Well,
by another member of council, or there are.
Yep, I understand. And that raises great points. Let me look at it from the other perspective. There's a whole bunch of legal fees involved and, that are incurred by the city. I've got no clue what they're about or, who causes those expenses or the rest of it. So in some ways, I can see where there's a conflict potential on the one hand. On the other hand, I can also see where if that attorney-client privilege is strictly enforced between the attorney and the individual counselor, it leaves everybody else in the dark.
And Randy, let me throw out another example. I think Katie threw out that one. What if one council member called the city attorney that with respect to a position that may be totally different from another council member's? And what's happened in the past, if somebody was to contact that, then the same opinion or same legal research would be directed to the quote legal liaison. And we felt that basically is a violation of our confidentiality in dealing with that. Everybody obviously is entitled.
Help me understand that a little better. I think, I'm not quite catching on that.
So if one of us was to contact the city attorney and ask a question,
okay,
that may be a controversial thing, but we want to get an answer legally. In the past, with quote a legal liaison of which we're unaware of, that opinion would not only go to whoever the council member was asking that, but would go to the mayor or whoever the legal liaison was. And that's why we never had a legal liaison. Then the council member can share that opinion and anybody's entitled to see that at that point. But to have it disclosed, I think is a violation, not attorney-client privilege, of confidentiality between a particular council member and the city attorney.
Yes, let's have our city attorneys chime in because these are great law school questions, and I love it. But go ahead.
Well, I appreciate everyone's comments. I'm not going to get into a dissertation here. I do want to plug myself and say I got 99% of both legal ethics exams I took in the course of my legal career. The rules of professional conduct expressly address the role of legal counsel when you have an organization as a client. And that rule says that a lawyer employed or retained by an organization represents the organization acting through its duly authorized constituents. If a lawyer for an organization knows that an officer, employee, or other person associated with the organization is engaged, intends to act, or refuses to act in a manner, lots of words, lawyers here, related to the representation that's a violation of a legal obligation to the organization or violation of law that might be imputed to the organization, might injure the organization, the lawyer shall proceed as is reasonably necessary in the best interest of the organization. It goes on. There's lots of details. I can give you a memo on this should you so desire. I want to point out that the mayor is correct that I represent the organization through its duly authorized constituents, which in your charter is the mayor and the members of council. Council has delegated almost all of those duties by ordinance to the city manager. I also want to point out that in the commentary, maybe somewhat presciently, the commentary on this rule of professional conduct, it says government agency. The duty in this rule applies to governmental organizations in defining precisely the identity of the client and prescribing the resulting obligations of such lawyers may be more difficult in the government context. And on the note of punting, it says is a matter beyond the scope of these rules. So it is acknowledged that this is a very difficult, fraught type of issue. I will say my duty is to the organization acting through its duly authorized constituents. What those lines of authority are depend very much on your documents, and I've reviewed those. You don't really have a one-on-one privilege with me. This comes up from time to time in CML discussions, but I'm not, we talk and I'm not obligated to share unless I think there's something wrong, some harm to the organization, et cetera, per the rules. So that's kind of the way it works. And I think we all have to have a level of trust in each other, I hope. I'm hearing that maybe that's not the case and we can work toward, I think Mike's made some good comments. Everyone's made some good comments about working toward a level of trust on that front so that we can all exercise our duties in that atmosphere. Just wanted to point those points out to you right now for this evening's discussion.
Thank you, Kathy. And I wanted to follow up, Councilor Blum, about liaison. Liaison has nothing to do with restricting access to Kathy at all. And in fact, that's the only reason, the only role of liaison is to appear in court and be the official representative of the city. It has nothing to do with, and I agree with you there. We had a discussion about that. We don't want anybody limited. We don't want anybody saying you can't go to our city attorney unless you get permission from the mayor. That's absolutely. I remember we had that discussion, so we don't want that at all. That's completely improper. Everybody on council should be able to go to Kathy individually and ask her for assistance and legal guidance on things related to our city on proper course of our jobs. So that is a misunderstanding that should never ever happen. It should never be anybody who goes to Kathy should never be reported to the liaison. That's not the liaison's role at all. It's not the mayor's role at all. But Kathy, everybody should have access.
Hasn't that created situations where Kathy would have to carbon copy you on any information we will receive?
No, that's never happened.
Okay.
It's never happened. Right, Kathy? I mean, never. I mean, I don't.
I think you wanted to receive communications regarding legal discussions I was having with staff, is my recollection. I thought that was a lot of email. So, but then
I think we had that discussion, and I thought that's kind of, and that issue is, that's why Chris reviews Kathy's. It's absolutely appropriate for Chris to review Kathy's bills, because Chris is the one who basically is assigning the work, or has to say this is what our staff is doing, because we're out of the loop. And I think our resolution between Kathy and me was, I don't want to be CC'd on all that stuff. I'd rather, but understanding that if we can just review your bills, then that takes care of it. It's much easier. You don't have to go through that.
That was the request. That's correct.
Yeah.
Have we determined that there's no legal liaison, and therefore
there is no legal liaison?
This point is moot. Whether
and if anybody wants to appoint me a legal liaison, I will refuse. I will not do it. Okay, I will not do it. It's a thankless job, and I'm not be there. But everybody needs to know that you can review that you have it right to review Kathy's bills. That's your right as in the position you have, and under her legal obligations as a lawyer to her client. That's us. I don't want to know what you're doing, and I don't want to be CC'd on what you're doing. I don't care. But I do think we need to make sure that we do supervise the attorney, because we ask her to do things that Chris doesn't know about. So we do have an obligation. I don't think it's with Kathy, but we could have a rogue city attorney, and we're going to ask, why weren't you watching the store about what the city attorney was doing, right? But I don't see that as an issue. But Kathy, you want to say something?
Well, I just want to take opportunity to say, yes, I take very seriously my obligation to communicate with city constituents what I'm doing, keep everyone in the loop without overburdening everybody. I invite you all to share with me if there's a way I can better communicate. If I've omitted anything, I want to, I take that very, very seriously. I can't represent you if you don't know what I'm doing. So I would just open up the floor now, later, maybe not now. So
yeah, I can
please let me
suggest this.
know.
A lot of times you do work for the staff, Kathy, and I think it's very useful for you during your report from the city attorney to say, hey, I've been working on staff on this, this, and this. Like, so we're always interested in the Comcast agreement, where that is. Every time I'd be a little more descriptive of, I know that you did a lot of work with staff on the RFP, all of that kind of stuff. During your report section, everything that you do with staff would be very useful, helpful to us to know what's going on.
Most everything on the agenda gets run by me. I'll just say that. So I tried to be economical in my, but I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a difference running to get rubber stamp it just for you to see. I know you look at every bill and ordinance you're required to under our charter, review every bill and ordinance. She has to sign all of them, that she's reviewed them and found them consistent with our Colorado law. So that's good. But it's the time when you actually spend billable hours, substantial time working with staff to come up with something. I think, letting us know and just saying your reports, I think would be very helpful to us too.
All right.
So again, to be sure that the point is not lost, as I stated as absolutely clearly as I could, the question really isn't whether there's a liaison or not. It is the conduct that's problematic. And I am hopeful through this conversation that we have some resolution, some acknowledgement that that is not the way we should operate, and an agreement to move forward operating differently. And if we have not come to that resolution yet, then I think there still needs to be discussion.
I hate to extend this anymore, but I agree with you on the liaison point. And I think we've established that everybody is entitled to see the bills. If they want them, you ask Kathy and you can see them. And I think, is there any other conduct of my conduct that you think I should change? We talked about Councilor Gallagher saying, be careful that I don't represent council, and I take that advice seriously and we'll do that. Is there others?
I think it's all somewhat related to that, but frankly, it was the self-appointment and which all just ties to the same thing of acting in a capacity beyond that of the mayor. And whether it's making statements in the Crier, which is, a taxpayer funded publication, not a newspaper with editorial content, or whether it's, representing the city in dealings with Natalie Anderson, or whether it's appointing positions that don't have council's approval. I think the underlying issue is that council is the controlling body here, not the mayor. And I believe that more respect is owed to the council's authority to make decisions.
Okay. Let me take issue with saying that I appointed myself. God knows I didn't appoint myself. I would not have wanted to do that. It was my, I assumed that I was, and I take it back, and that's mea culpa, but I absolutely did not appoint myself. And if it is absolutely council's decision about whether they want an appointment, whether they want a legal liaison, and clearly the appearance maybe here is, or the suggestion is no, and I'm happy with that, and that's great. That's the decision of council, and that's less for me to do, and that's terrific. As far as the issuing, is there other? So I take issue saying I appointed myself. I didn't. That's not true. And I did not, negotiate on behalf of the city with Natalie. I simply met with her and as soon as I met with her and understood what was going on, I brought it to the attention of all of you. I called all of you on the phone, I think except for Katie, and said, hey, Natalie I met with Natalie and she's suggesting that they may be interested in this. And immediately, as soon as I did that, that's appropriate. Christina and Lucinda met with Natalie. That was entirely appropriate. That's what they do. They're on the committee. They should be meeting with the benefactor of the property, and that was entirely. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, in fact, they ought to get a medal for meeting with her and talking to her. That's what they're supposed to do. So I was careful not to be acting on behalf of the city, but in reporting to you all about what the development was from Natalie Anderson. Obviously, I had no idea that the Anderson family would want to take this. It was the last thing in my mind, thinking that she wanted to. The Anderson family would want to come back and take this on. So it didn't come from me. It really was a discussion with Natalie sitting down about, and who said the first word, I don't know, but it was clearly her intent that she was very interested in going not the direction of the master plan of the Quincy Farm Committee, but doing something else with her family.
But just so I'm clear, you're doubling down on your position right now. Is that correct? You're saying that you did not reach out to them, because I thought we put this to bed. I thought I heard testimony just an hour ago or whatever it was that was pretty convincing in my mind that they basically called you out on it. And it is what it is. But if that is what it is, you're now saying that that's not what it is. So
her descriptions of the meetings are entirely accurate. That's exactly right. Now, who said first? I mean, when she went down, I had the message from Lucinda and Christina after that meeting that Natalie was really interested in this direction, and then I had the meeting with Natalie again, and that was the interested that her family may be interested in this. I said, whether I said it first, it was clearly coming from her. I wouldn't have had that idea, because my last conversation with Ben Fitzgerald was, we want nothing to do with this. I mean, he was out of here. He said, you guys, good luck with this, but he didn't want anything to do with it. So I was surprised that Natalie had any interest in her family, and it never occurred to me that her family would be interested in taking this on and taking title of the property. So that's what happened. I mean, but, people see the meetings and everything that they recounted is exactly correct. That's the way the meetings happen. Except she didn't know that I called you after the meeting with her, council members, and said, here's what's going on. And then all the discussions about meeting with Chris is accurate. All the discussions about our council asking her we asked her for a written letter of her interest, right? She's also correct in saying the council at a meeting said, we want to know what your plan is, right? And so the council as a group asked her for a plan. That is true.
We know what we said, Russell. We were all there, but the question is how that really whole thing shook out. Because where I'm struggling with all this, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into my council member report. I guess this is all I was going to say in my report. Was,
okay.
I'm struggling with this right now. I'm struggling with this because I feel like Kathy mentioned, that we're trying to gain this level of trust and have this level of trust amongst each other. I don't have it right now. And I'm just, it's really disturbing for me that I don't have a level of trust with what I'm hearing from you. And I hate that. I don't want to have that, but I've got there's so much conviction coming from what I'm hearing on the other side of this from Jerry and Natalie. And at the end of the day, we just lost. I think we're all this is noise, this background noise, the stuff we're talking about right now, this legal liaison crap. It doesn't make a bit of difference in the grand scheme of things. What happened tonight is we lost the Natalie Anderson opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's a real shame. And we can rewind this whole story to try to figure out forensically how it happened and what went down. I don't want to do that, but man, I feel like an apology is owed to Natalie and her family. Probably, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think you owe Natalie an apology. I'm going to go ahead and apologize to her as well, because we as a council put her through this process, but the process was pitched to us as something different than I believe it was. And so now it's your story, Russell, against hers and against that of Jerry. And we're never going to know the real truth, and I'm just going to accept that. but it's just super disturbing for me to think that this potential for Quincy Farm and we talk about, she talks about, and Jerry Neff talks about what's best for the farm. The option that's potentially best for the farm, one possible option that might be the best one for the farm just went away. And it's because of the dealings and the way it all went down. And I wish we could rewind this and conversations could be had differently between you and her. And then the pitch that was given to the city and that the city gave back to her direction and all those things that happened could have been done possibly differently, because we may have ended up here at the same place, right? If 4 months ago, we were all sitting here scratching our head trying to figure out what to do, and we might have eventually come to the same conclusion, let's take it out to an RFP. And you know what? The Anderson family might be a great candidate for that RFP. And then it would have been level playing field. Everyone's bidding against each other. And it's really the best. What do we feel is the best for the farm and for the village? And right now, as it is, I mean, we may have lost our absolute best scenario. Certainly the one that's most passionate about the property, that is gone. So I'm disturbed by this. My level of trust, there's a big gap in trust for me right now, and I'm concerned about the mayoral musings. There's a lot of things going on right now for me that I'm really disturbed about, and I hope things get better amongst us. So I will. I had questions to ask really in my report tonight to Jay about Quincy undergrounding, but I don't want to take the. I don't want to derail what we're talking about right now. I think this is much more of an important topic to talk about than other things right now. So that's it. Thank you.
Can I jump in quickly? Dan, when we say we might have lost the best, I would say, candidate for this opportunity, I agree with you. But let's not forget, when this came to the council and Natalie was presenting to us, right? I think I was the one that probably showed my enthusiasm that, boy, this is great. How can we work with you? And then a couple of the council folks, they started, nope, she might have something under her sleeve. Why would she want to do this? Is it because of tax issues or because of what is it? Maybe we should take it to RFI process. So I want to make sure we don't, right now, this is at this point, I think if we're going to play a blame game and start pointing fingers, well, you owe her apology, he owes her apology or whatever, just remember at least where we got as a council involved, and then what were the events. The events was she came to us with very clear idea what she wants to do. I personally loved it. It's like, okay, then we went behind a closed door and we had a conversation as, boy, what are all the things that we started throwing on the whiteboard as our issues? So this is a much wider discussion. If we're going to start pointing finger, why, what happened? But here's the thing. I don't consider this a lost event. I still think that we actually, basically sort of maybe semi-shoot ourselves in the foot. But if we are really think that she is the best candidate and we want to make this work, I think there is a way to go. I think she didn't just completely close the door. I haven't seen the letter. But we can actually go have a conversation and do say, you know what, these are the steps that you're right. We probably and we can probably have a conversation and make it happen. But the question is today, if she comes back, her issue was, we went through this and now the RFI process, you guys are initiating that. So do we want her? Do we want her if we think that if she's the best candidate and for us to go and ask 2 or 3 of us or whatever to go and have a conversation, say how we make that happen? Or do we want to go through this RFI process? I mean, to me, what I was hearing from her is that I'm not going to go through this RFI process with you. But remember, for so many reasons, I am your best candidate. So let me stop right there. I'm just, again, what is our direction here? Is this a separate conversation we got to have?
I guess, when I listen to the comments, I think that, well, first of all, Dan, you're probably right in that we have not been very linear with Natalie in terms of process and expectations and all of that. And there's an apology that might well be owed. And I kind of think rather than one counselor, maybe that ought to be on behalf of us as a group. With respect to the RFI process, you raised some good points, Afshin. I kind of think that in some ways, from a credibility perspective, from a process perspective, from a, playing the cards face up on the table, in some ways that train sort of left the station. I don't think we can back off of that process. On the other hand, I think we can make Natalie feel welcome. She's already given us an idea of what she's thinking. So maybe there's a way to save face with her, but not abort the RFI process. Because I think we'd go back to some of the earlier conversations around, well, folks might perceive it as an inside deal, or folks might, she's got an inside track. And I think, at least me as an individual, I'd like to be above board. And shame on me for not thinking about the RFI business earlier, but okay, mistakes happen. So long story short, I think, yeah, it certainly would be a good gesture to apologize as a group on the one hand. On the other hand, I think we really should stick with the RFI process and incorporate her as a part of that applicant pool if she's willing.
I thought what she said was that she was out, but
people change their minds.
they might, yeah, which is certainly, I mean, the RFP process is there. And if people want to change their mind, to be honest, I don't want to, rub salt in the wound by going back to her and saying, oh, no, sorry, please submit something. And then going a different direction. I mean, I'm not going to do it to her again.
No, that's a good point, Katie. But I think it's more about feeling welcome, and I think she may have been operating in good faith and gave us what she thought we wanted. And, now we're changing direction on her and all the rest of it. And I think, if we say, well, we're sorry, bad judgment on our part, but at the same time, we really do appreciate your involvement and offer and sincerity and would welcome a response from you. She can always say, no, not going to do it. And
this isn't about blame, but the city, we have a lot of residents that we have to be accountable to for our conduct and our behavior as a city and as a city council. I am sorry, but I am not willing to acknowledge or to admit to proposing to Natalie Anderson that she take back ownership of the farm and then changing course. That was not the city's doing. If there's an apology, I have considered apologizing to Natalie Anderson for being dragged into what has turned into a political mess, frankly, that is not her concern. And if I were her, I'd be saying, screw all you guys. But the city did not create this problem. And the only reason that it's important, because I'm not above apologizing, even when it's not my fault, so to speak. But the only reason that it's important is, as you heard in Jerry Neff's testimony, there is still, the city did this, the city did that, the city didn't do any of that stuff.
No, but I think where we have some accountability is, for 5 years, we've kind of had committees that haven't been maybe as effective as they might have been, plans that were way beyond the scope of what Colorado Open Lands would support and all of that. So while I understand your point about the communications and the direction that she had, on the one hand, on the other hand, we've kind of fumbled the ball.
I disagree so strongly, Randy, that I just can't even express it.
Right, and that feels on us to some degree.
Public input meeting after public input meeting after public input meeting. We had proposals from committee, and the only reason that we're still doing this is because no one on this council was willing to say to people who disagreed, I hear you, I understand you, but I disagree with you. That is the only reason we're here. We could have, when people objected to the plan that was developed after community input and hundreds of hours of volunteer time, if not thousands, we could have said, I really appreciate your input and I do hear you, but this is the direction that the committee has decided to go, and the council's going to support that and back them up. But instead, we left everybody out hanging. And now we've, reversed course on everybody. We've alienated our volunteers. We've alienated people because we won't put a stake in the sand and make a decision. So if there's accountability there, that's what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not failure of our committees.
Well, okay. I mean, I'm thinking about it in terms of our leadership, not the committee itself, our guidance.
Well, what Natalie's really upset about is she submitted this plan and then we decided to do an RFP. And but she had to have known that we're an open, the city has special duties to its citizens to open this up. And that's the crux of it, really. It's that she submitted a plan and we haven't responded to it, and instead we did an RFP.
Are we in the same meeting? I thought the letter she read specifically expressed her disappointment that you proposed the idea to her and then sold it to the city as her idea. And then when we came back and said, great, let's hear your idea, and asked her to put some information together and then reneged on it. That's what I heard her say she was upset about.
I heard her say is that she submitted this plan, this plan, and it's on our website, and then we decided to open it up for others. That's what she's upset about. But she had to have known that we can't do that as a city. I mean, in our defense, we just can't do a single source thing without letting others in the community have a say. And I think the our decision as a council was correct to open it up.
So can I jump in? Look, I mean, right now, we're sort of going in a circle. I think most people agree that we would like to have her as part of the RFI process. If she decides not to do it after we approach her once, then that's her decision. But what she has sent our way, it is an RFI. So in a way, I mean, if I was sitting in front of her, not that I'm saying is that I'm the one who is qualified to sit in front of her, but if I was sitting in front of her, I would say, Natalie, look, we heard you, we understand your disappointment, you're upset, and you want to withdraw, and that's your decision. But you have put so much time and effort into this. Why don't you bring this to a completion? We are basically sending this RFI, get your proposal, put it into the RFI format. We might get 1 RFI, we might get 10 RFI, but you're definitely a good candidate for so many reasons. But again, as a city, we do have to go through that RFI process to be fair to everybody. And that's it. She's either going to say, screw you, I'm just done with you guys. Or she's going to say, okay, I spent all this time, I will spend another 10 hours, put this together and let it go, and let's go through the process. I mean, that would be my approach, because, or we can just say goodbye to it. I don't want to say goodbye to it. I think we can make this work. And again, she may not come to be the best candidate after we get to an RFI, but I would hate to, start getting all these RFI response, and I'm like, they're like, Natalie's here and everybody's down here. These RFIs the response we get. So I like to propose that, we find a coordinated way as a team with the mayor, with the council, somebody go have a good heart-to-heart conversation, somebody along, of course, with the city manager, with the lawyer, whoever needs to be involved, have a heart-to-heart conversation. We say, apply for the RFI. Nothing's guaranteed, and that's it. So that would be my recommendation. Back to you.
Afshin, it's an RFP, just so you keep saying RFI. I just
I'm
want to
sorry,
correct
RFP, yes.
Yeah.
Because usually I fill out RFIs, so sorry.
My comment would be, I think at this point tonight, we need to respect Natalie. She has gone through a very painful process, and this is not the time. I would advocate that we put some time, let some time pass, show her respect if we encounter her. This whole thing is so unfortunate, and when it's all said and done, it's like a really bad. It's really unfortunate, and the way the whole thing's come down. And I just, out of respect for Natalie, her family, the recommendation would be to give her a little bit of time, and then maybe circle back to her. But I don't think there's an easy answer on this right now. So, and we're committed to the RFP process. So
I was just going to jump in.
If she wants to come back in.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Chris.
Nope, no, please finish. Yeah.
If she wants to come back in, great. She is more than welcome. We have to give her real respect and her family.
Yeah, I was just going to, but before you spoke, Mike, I was going to just mention about the RFP itself. I think there's a lot of good conversation with Natalie, and we can continue to have that conversation. I would offer my opinion to all of council, not that you're asking for it, but the RFP, I'm not sure if council realizes the amount of support and positive feedback that we have received about this process. I think there was a real frustration with the potential survey and what did that mean, and is it going to be biased and all these other things. And there's been almost a relief that I have heard from multiple folks in the community about the RFP process. So my advice and recommendation to council would be that we still continue to make progress and move towards that RFP. I just don't want that to get lost with the conversation about Natalie and what steps we should be taking in response to her. I absolutely think that should be fully and thoughtfully considered, but I don't want my recommendation would be for the RFP not to hit a pause button or anything like that while we're doing all that.
I don't think anyone's suggesting that, Chris. I haven't heard anyone suggest that.
Okay.
Agree.
No, and I'll second on their comments about the RFP. A lot of citizen pro comments for the RFP process and getting it a transparent process and getting it out there. So.
And given the way that the action of council to explore Natalie's proposal is being kind of thrown back at us as us sending her on a tangent, I personally will not vote to reach out to her again. She is absolutely welcome. I'll state that here publicly if she listens to this message, and I'm happy to tell that to her personally, but I will not be in favor of actively soliciting from her. I do think that she has been misled, and I will not be part of continuing that.
Well, Katie, I wouldn't suggest we continue to mislead her, but there is a process. She's a viable contested in that process, and might well end up being the best one. So I'd hate to overlook her just because, you know, she's offended, understandably, and it feels like we should, I think to Mike's comment, we should probably try to make that right. We don't want to go around offending people, but I don't see any harm in making her feel welcome into this process.
Making someone feel welcome and actively soliciting them to submit and be encouraging them to be a part of the process, which in the end might result in them not being the winner. You know, it was, the mayor said to me specifically that when I was expressing that the city did not take this on, his words to me were, "It was you, Katie. It was you who did that. You asked her to submit a proposal." Now, I assume by that he meant when we as a council voted to explore the possibility. And I don't want to treat people that way. I don't want to be responsible for leading people on tangents. And so I am choosing, I won't be supportive of that idea. I would welcome any person, Natalie included, who would like to submit a proposal, and I would look forward to hearing anyone and everyone's ideas. But I am not specifically going to go out and recruit people to submit, because I think that gives a misleading impression.
Well, no, I mean, I don't, it's more awareness, right? Like, you know, going to go advertise a product, you got to make sure people are aware of it, or they aren't going to buy it. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the solicitation. I sure wouldn't support misleading people in any way, you know, about their chances or their prospects in the process. But I think making not just Natalie, but anybody that might be a viable candidate, connecting with them and being interested feels to me like a right thing to do.
It's probably a moot point anyway. My guess is that she's going to be not interested in dealing with this issue anymore as a result of what's transpired. And although we may hear from her further, it just, I'm fearful that it may not be in the form of fashion that we're hoping for.
Look at it this way. Look, by the way, I'm all about for any candidacy, doesn't matter if it's for a lot or for a land or for a good candidate for a job, to solicit, talk to them and be pretty transparent and frank with them and say, we'd love for you to apply, but you're going to be probably one of several candidates. You may or may not get the job, or you may or may not get the property. But you know what? You're one of, you know, we like you and we think that you would be a good candidate. And that's not misleading. You're being very transparent and open and trying to recruit the best candidate to apply for whatever it is. This is not any different. And for me, you know, to actually go back, and so we can either do nothing, we can just go apologize, or we can just say, you know what, you know, we might have, you might have been misled or you felt that way. But the reality is what you started, it led us to the process of RFP, because that's the right thing for the city. We have to also watch for the city. And we would welcome for you to apply. There are two answers. Again, no, go screw yourself, or yes, you know what, I will go ahead and do it. We have nothing to lose. It's a good candidate. Why do we want to go ahead and, I can put my pride aside and just have a conversation with her. Of course, I will not do it, you know, because we all got to agree on it. But we gotta, I mean, and this is not the only Natalie's one. Anybody else that we think they're a good candidate, let's go have a conversation and say, put your, you know, work on this proposal. So that's.
I appreciate that, Ashen, but I'll be honest, your comment at that meeting where you said, I'll give it to you today, doesn't help with
you know what?
That is misleading.
You know what? She was up there and she came up with a great case, great scenario. And you know what? Everybody's sitting there and grilling her. Oh, this, well, you know, and I want to just encourage her to continue. It's on public record. It's not I'm giving it to you. Go look at the meeting minutes and tell me if I said I give it to you, I'd love to see it again. Okay, go look at the meeting minutes.
Okay, I will, because that is.
Well, I know you do. You have plenty of time. But here's the thing: we got to go ahead and right now come up with a solution. Okay. What do we want to do? And we don't have to make a decision today. But I think we got to go ahead and have that conversation in the next couple of weeks and decide what we want to do with it. That's all.
I think we've talked through it here. I think everybody agrees we're going to do an RFP. It's the way to go. I hope Natalie applies. I think her family, would be an ideal kind of entity to take this back for a lot of reasons, because they have a great motive, and I hope she does. But it's up to her. I mean, she doesn't have to participate in the RFP process if she doesn't want to. And clearly, if she's already made that decision, our words may be moot. I think she's a wonderful person. I think the family is a wonderful family, and I'm sorry it happened like this, and we had the hiccups with how it went. But that's, some of this is kind of the nature of the process. We as a city have to act in a certain way, and that's just the way it goes. And I hope she reconsiders, and I hope she applies. But I think we just need to, as a city, need to press ahead with the RFP. And unless there are other comments from council members or other reports, it sounds like we've exhausted the reports from council. Yes, city attorney.
I have a lot. Just a little light moment there. Is that the case? I didn't mean to interject. Is everybody done with their reports? And okay. So we're doing lots. We're working on updating the model traffic code. I've been working with staff on some personnel matters, plus advising them on the application interpretation of a new state law on the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, which requires both a paid sick leave and pandemic public health emergency leave. Various ongoing planning and engineering issues involving properties, neighbors, licenses on trails, things of that nature. Overseeing some land use application processing, reviewing those. One is coming up soon at your next meeting. Working on with outside counsel on the Comcast agreement. There will be a study session coming up to get some feedback and input from council, but we'll have a draft. I believe we'll have a draft. I need to confirm that, but there will be, Ken Feldman will be working with you. As you know, that's his specialty. I have picked the brain of the CCUA partner in Ken Feldman's office on drones. And I'm currently talking with staff about what the next best steps are for me to communicate with you on what we ought to do with changes in regulations and drones and dealing with the existing regulations on drones in the city. Contracts are a steady go all the time. Maybe not for the next meeting, but typically we regularly get small cell wireless applications that I'm asked to briefly review and comment on. As you all know, we just approved the CBI audit documents related to that process. One of my of council worked on that with Ms. Gillespie. I have been asked to, we're updating a sort of an informational document on how to form a GID so that is ready to hand for citizens. Been asked to go over rules of procedure with PTRC, so that's just got on the calendar. We do regularly monitor the police legal advisors group and are in communication with our chief on issues as they arise. That's been a hot year for that. So that's a brief, that's what I could come up with tonight. Just for clarity, I guess I need to ask, should I just send my bills to the city manager or
yes,
or how? I want to get some very clear direction on that.
Send them to the city manager, and that's fine. And anybody who wants to review them can ask the city manager.
That sounds like a great arrangement to me. All right, that's all I have.
I don't really have reports tonight. I just want to say, I do want to thank all of council for the discussion in the study session. I think council can tell that, staff took that task very seriously, and we attempted to put together the best possible RFP we could that we thought reflected the direction of council. And I thought the conversation was extremely helpful. And so I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for the feedback. That's the only report I have tonight. And
Chief,
I don't know if other directors have any other reports. I think we're pretty light on that tonight, but I'll just ask if any directors have reports.
I have no report tonight. Thank you.
I have no report tonight.
I would just like to also thank City Council for your time today. I think the retreat was very effective and appreciate all the comments and feedback from staff earlier.
all right, and hearing, I think that's the end of our reports. Is that, unless there's any other business, it is 8:10 and will be adjourned without objection. Thank you, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Have a good